I am Dr. Cam, and I've decided over the next month I am going to jump online at 9:30 every morning on the weekdays to talk about parenting and answer questions or just talk about the latest things that I've learned. I like to listen to podcasts and books, and I always end up tying it to parenting, so I like to share my lessons with you. So today I just want to introduce myself and tell you a little about who I am. So I'm Cameron Caswell. My clients call me Dr. Cam, and I love that. So I kind of am embracing that and using Dr. Cam. And what I do is I work with parents and their teenagers. And my whole goal is to help parents and teenagers learn to communicate better because I know raising teens is really hard. I have a 14-year-old daughter myself, so I live it every day. I know. And we end up getting in these ruts of emotions and battles and yelling and frustration, and I hear about it all the time and I experience it. And my goal is to help you navigate adolescence because here's a little secret. Although raising teens is really tough, it doesn't have to be as tough as we're making it. Seriously, it does not have to be this hard. And here's how I know this beyond my personal experience, a bigger breath. So I I got my PhD in developmental psychology, and while I was getting my degree, I was also paying for it multiple ways, and one of those ways is by teaching undergrad classes. And so I taught a lot of adolescent classes at George Mason University, and one of the classes, my most favorite class to teach, was adolescent psychology. One reason I related a lot to it, I think there's still a very vibrant teen inside of me, which shows in my actions a lot of times. The other reason is I just was learning so much again about how the teen mind works and the difference. I mean, being a teenager, it's a whole different experience than being a kid and being an adult. And a lot of it is to do with where our brain is in development and where we are in our personality development. So I'm teaching this class, loved it. Little secret kind of underlying truth about me is I actually found a use for all the teenage movies that I so loved. And I used to use the clips all the time. So I was finally like, yes, I'm using these for professional use. Anyway, so I taught this class, and all these parents started coming up to me. Taught an evening class, so I had a lot of adults in my class, and a lot of them had their own teenagers. And they started coming up to me and saying, Dr. Cam, what I'm learning in your class is completely transforming the way I'm interacting with my own teen. Now that I understand why they're behaving the way they do, why they're acting this way, why they can be so emotional, now that I understand this, it's completely changing the way I'm interacting with my own teen. And I now understand why my teen's behaving this way, and I have a lot more patience, and I'm a lot more effective at addressing it. And as I kept hearing these stories, I'm thinking, why don't more parents know this information? The people that need it the most are the parents, or the people. People that need it the most are the parents. And the parents don't have this information. Why not? And ever since then, I have been on this mission to get this information into the hands of as many parents as I possibly can. And so then I took a job in marketing, of course. Safer that way, right? But as I was doing this job, I kept finding myself drawn to people with teenagers, and I would start talking to them, and we would start discussing what was going on with them. And I wasn't a parent at the time, but I loved hearing about what they were doing and applying what I had known and kind of teaching them, this is what I know. And I started getting all this positive feedback about, wow, what you taught me, what you told me actually changed the way I'm interacting with my teenager. One of my favorite stories was this guy, Bill, that I worked with. And he came up to me once because actually after people started hearing I was doing this, people started coming and seeking me out with their questions, which I loved. But so one guy, Bill, came up to me and he said, my wife and I are struggling tremendously with our teen son, and we're fighting all the time. And so I asked him, okay, so what's going on with your teen son? And he said he is a straight A student. He plays in the school, or he plays in the school band, and he plays in the church band. He plays football, and I'm thinking, what the heck is wrong with this kid? Like, how can they be fighting with this kid? He sounds really awesome. And he said, but his room is a disaster. It's gross. And no matter what we do, we cannot get him to clean up his room. And my wife and I are fighting with him constantly, trying to get him to clean his room. And it's just, we're fighting all the time now because of it. And I sat back and thought about it for a while, and I said, so Bill, why is it so important that his room is clean? What are you trying to teach him? And is it worth your relationship? And he thought about it for a while, and he had some good reasons. And he was like, but I'm going to go talk to my wife about this. And I actually didn't talk to Bill for a while after that. I didn't work directly with him, so I didn't see him. And I ran into him a few months later, and he just came up and said, oh my gosh, do you remember what you told me or said to me a few months ago? And at that point, I couldn't remember. And he reminded me, and he said, my wife and I thought about it, and we decided, you know what? There really wasn't, we had just gotten so set on him having his room clean, and we were so set on winning this battle that we kind of lost sight of it. And we dropped it. We dropped that one thing. And our fights dropped tremendously. And we started actually enjoying each other again because we let that one thing go. They didn't let everything go. They let that one thing go. And what was crazy is after a few weeks, their son actually started cleaning his room on his own because they were no longer nagging about it. And he decided, I actually want my room clean. And now that my parents aren't pushing me to do it, and I can make the decision on my own, I'm going to actually decide that I want to clean my room. And what happens is when we get in these battles with our kids constantly and we end up nagging and arguing with them all the time, they start pushing back. If you go and push somebody, they're going to push back. Another way I heard it, I love this, was someone told me they had heard it described as playing tennis. And when you're playing tennis, if you keep hitting the ball back and they keep hitting the ball back, you're going to keep getting caught up in it. If you just stop playing and stop fighting with it, it's going to end eventually. So this is just one of the little tips I had taught, is you need to step back sometimes. So after I started talking to all these people and getting more and more stories and finding more and more solutions and helping them and getting feedback that, oh my gosh, what you're teaching me is actually helping me, I got more involved in it. And I actually adopted my daughter as a single mom. So I'm saying this because I had a lot of other things going on, and creating my own business doing this was a little scary. I also was experiencing motherhood firsthand, which is an enormous lesson on its own, obviously. So as I was doing that, and I kept building and finding that I loved this so much, and recently, my daughter's now 14, I decided that I couldn't ignore it anymore, and this is what I loved to do. And I found that there was a lot of people that really could use this information, because I'm so sad when I see this huge period of time, and it's actually one of the most influential times of our children's life as adolescents, that a lot of us don't end up appreciating it or enjoying it. We end up just stuck in fighting. And so my goal was, now I want to get out there and I want to share my message, and I want to help people actually enjoy this period of time. And so I started my own business in past October, and I have been counseling or coaching. I am a family coach. So I've been coaching families since then, and I absolutely love what I do. And a little insight into what I do, I meet with parents alone, I meet with teens alone, I work with parents and their kids together, and I love working with them to help build up their communication. And I teach them how to understand one another. And I developed this method I call the P.R.I.M.E Parenting Method. And P.R.I.M.E is actually an acronym. And I base this off of really the steps that I walk through, both in my own parenting and with my clients. And over the next week, I'll dig a little bit deeper into what each of those stages are, but just a quick overview of what P.R.I.M.E stands for. So the P in P.R.I.M.E stands for the problem. And the reason I put the problem first is because until we are clear on what the problem is, very specific on what the problem is, it's pretty much impossible to find a solution and resolve it. So an example is parents will say, my teen is very disrespectful. Well, what does disrespectful mean to you? And does it mean the same thing to your teen? Because a lot of times we'll say to our teens, and I've done this too, stop being so disrespectful. And that could mean dozens and dozens of things. And so we tell our teen to stop being disrespectful and then get frustrated because they don't stop doing the behavior we're actually referencing. And then we get more angry because they continue to be disrespectful when we actually never really gave them the exact specifics of what we meant. Do we not like that they're rolling their eyes? Do we not like that they're standing like this, just looking at us with attitude? Do we not like that they're yelling back? Are they doing it to everyone? So we'll get a little bit more into that, but you have to be very specific about what the problem is before you can do anything else. The next thing is R, and this is the reason. And this is really one of my sweet spots of what I love to do, and one of the things that I think a lot of parents don't realize is the reason behind. And there's really 4 core reasons behind their behavior, which I'll go into later too. But once we understand why they're acting the way they are, and let me tell you, there's always a reason, and it's not because they're just being jerks. It may be because they're being teenagers, but there's a lot that means. So there's a reason behind it. And once we understand the reason, we can address it far more effectively. Then the I is intention. And this was basically one of the things that kind of the core between what I talked to Bill about was, what is your intention with this? Why is this so important to you? And in Bill's case, it wasn't important. And I'm not saying it's not always important. Many times and often it is very important. But we need to be very clear on why it's important. Not only why is it important to us, but being able to communicate why it's important to our teen. Because our teens right now, just because I said so no longer works with them. You already know that. You've tried it, it doesn't work. And there's a reason why. They're thinking much more critically. They're trying to learn. So we need to have a really good explanation behind it. And our goal is to actually end up motivating them, which is one of the reasons. A lot of times they're not motivated. And we've got to look into how do we motivate them. The M is mindset. And this is huge. So I am a fanatic about reading mindset books. And so I have so many just little nuggets that I've pulled, and everything I pull, I end up tying to parenting. And so in this mindset section, I share a lot of different tools, but one of the biggest ones that I want to share right now is the fixed versus growth mindset. And a lot of times as parents, we get in this fixed mindset of our teens are just this way. Our teens are just acting this way, or our teens just have this problem. And we don't look at, we kind of set this and send this message, and this happens a lot with labeling. We set this message that this is just the way they are, which gives them no room to improve, which is why they just get frustrated, because if they are that way, then we're just kind of judging them for being that way without giving them the opportunity to improve. So when we change our mindset to a growth mindset where it's, this is what's going on right now. This is your behavior right now. then we can give them room to grow. We can say, this is where we are and this is where I am right now, but we've got room to grow. The final one is empower. And empower is really where most parents want to leap to immediately. And this is really the tools to guide our kids, the tools to raise our kids in an effective way. And this is really things like giving them feedback, creating boundaries and consequences. And here's another little secret. If you do the first 4 steps of this P.R.I.M.E parenting method, you almost never need to use any of the tools. Those are really the last ditch efforts that we need to do when nothing else works. But if we get all this other stuff working, if we understand the problem and we are clear on the reason and we know what our intention is and we are clear on our mindset, all of a sudden, all of these rigid rules we have to lay in place and these consequences and taking their phone, we don't need it anymore. I know, shocking, but I will tell you as a parent, I don't think I've ever taken my phone away from my daughter. I've never had to. And she is amazing. I'm biased, but she's amazing. And we don't have a lot of these arguments and fights and disagreements that a lot of other parents I talk to have. And I'll attribute a lot of to it, her just being cool and amazing, but I'm also going to say I use all of the techniques that I teach my parents, and they work. So I'm going to do this again tomorrow. And I see Misty. Hopefully you're still there, Misty. Love you. I'm going to be here again 9:30 tomorrow. If you have any questions, email them to me at drcam@drcamconsulting.com. That's drcam, C-A-M, @drcamconsulting.com. Or just join me and post it tomorrow. But I will see you then.